Good morning. I'm excited to be talking with another guest this morning. He is the owner and founder of Energy Empire. His name's Alan Rattray. How are you this morning, my friend?
Good morning, Maliki. We're not quite an empire yet. We're an umpire.
Oh, mistake number one.
One day, maybe an empire.
That's a great goal. It's a great goal, yeah. Alan's based in Victoria in Australia. I'm based in Brisbane, Queensland, so we haven't physically met. And even with the COVID restrictions and lockdowns and stuff, we're still able to catch up on Zoom and stuff. So that's really good. Alan has basically a 40-year career, I think, in the energy industry. And before we jump into the episode, I'd just like the audience to get a quick, just to get to know you a little bit better in a short amount of time. It's a segment called 5 Fast Facts. So are you ready, Alan?
Yep.
Are you a coffee or a tea person?
Well, both. I have both every day.
I haven't heard of that response before. Right, that's interesting. Both. Is it is it like coffee in the morning and tea in the afternoon, or is it just whatever you feel like?
No, it's tea first thing.
Right.
Coffee after after breakfast, and then coffee after lunch.
Interesting combo.
It's a boring pack, isn't it?
It's interesting. I've never heard of that one before. Usually, if you're a coffee person, you're a coffee, not you, but just in general, people are coffee snobs. And they are very strict on what they drink with coffee, and then tea are kind of like just sort of lackadaisical, I guess. So that's interesting. I've never heard that combo before. Question number.
Drink quite a few varieties of tea as well. Green tea, black tea.
Are you a T2 fan?
Yeah, T2 make really good tea. Yeah.
There we go. Question number 2. Did you grow up in a small or a big family?
Well, 3 siblings. So I guess that makes it a big family by today's standards anyway.
That's correct. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Question number 3. Are you a cat or a dog person, and why?
Dog definitely, really.
Okay.
I don't mind cats, but yeah, I love dogs.
Okay.
And why? Probably history, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, my probably really came from my dad, who loved dogs and hated cats because they got out and ate birds and.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, more they weren't. Yeah, more of a pest versus a family.
Particularly in the wild when they get going in the wild there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my son has 2 cats, and so I'm learning to live with cats.
That's a good compromise. Question number 4. So rate from 1 to 3, 1 being your favorite, 3 being the least favorite. Tim Tams, Vegemite, Bunnings Snag.
Vegemite easily.
Vegemite number 1 through and through is your favorite?
Yeah. And the other 2 are distant. Daylight, and then the other 2.
Yeah. That's interesting. We had another person say sort of the reverse. That I think she liked Tim Tams and Bunnings Snag equally the same, and then Vegemite was just not even on her radar. So you had the reverse there. So that's an interesting point. Last question: do you prefer using Apple products or Android?
Apple.
Yep. Very common response. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thanks for that, mate. Good to get to know you a little bit better. So like I was saying before, Alan, he's the founder of Energy Umpire, and has been involved in the energy industry in Australia for over 40 years. And so before this, you were a farmer in rural Victoria, which I'm really interested to go more deeper into and understand a little bit more of that. But in our questions, where were you born and what did your parents do for a living?
I was born in Melbourne, and I guess my parents were pretty unique. Well, unique, I guess, in a way, in that they're both dentists.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And in fact, they were the first dentists to graduate with master's degree from Melbourne University. They were in the group that was the first.
So they were business
um,
owners as well. So they sort of ran their own dentistry practice, I think, is that what it's called?
yes, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and yeah. I mean, prior to that, dentistry was a not so much a professional occupation. You know, it became professionalised at about the time that they were. You know, the course that they did was one of the early professional university courses that was available for for dentistry. Prior to that, it was, you know, really people improvising. You know, people might be a chemist and learn how to pull out teeth or.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So is it safe to say that you didn't grow up with lollies?
That's right. Absolutely. Just the odd treat. That was it.
That's no sugar in your household growing up. That would make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Very little.
yeah. What's one thing you struggled with at school, and one thing you really excelled at?
Uh, Probably I struggled most with English.
Wow.
Interestingly.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't terrible at it, but I just, yeah, didn't shoot the lights out with English. And probably the best things the things I was best at were maths and sciences.
Right. Yep.
Mm.
And I suspect the maths and sciences helped you in your decision to study engineering, perhaps?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, right. So what, I guess I'm just trying to get a bit of an origin story and in my mind, map that journey before we actually get into Energy Umpire. So you basically grew up in Melbourne. Where did the farming aspect come into it? I guess I'm sort of jumping ahead here, but
Well,
I'm interested to know about that.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I suppose I've been sort of city rural pretty much all my life, because my dad bought a farm when I was about 5,
Right.
and I've really had an association with farming ever since. And initially, sort of, so we were Melbourne based, so it's sort of city farmers, I guess, um, and that sort of continued. That continued until a couple of years ago, a few years ago now.
Right.
So, yeah, I bought my own farm when I was about 40.
Okay.
And yeah, so, and then I just sold that a few years ago.
So when you say city farmers, you lived in the city, but you owned a farm and you traveled out there periodically to maintain it?
That's right. Yeah.
Wow. Is that a common, is that sort of a common path, I guess you could say, or maybe a more non-traditional approach to farming?
Yeah, I suppose, I don't know that it's all that common, but yeah, I guess there's, you know, we weren't Robinson Crusoe. There are other people doing it.
Right. Okay.
But,
So
you know, sort of, yeah, it sort of might sound like you're not real farmers, but, you know, I think we were real farmers.
Oh, 100%. Oh no, I
You
love.
know, get out and do fencing, get out after the cattle, and you know, fix the water supply, and yeah, just all the things that happen on a farm.
Yeah, no, I got you, mate. 100%. And
Yeah.
I actually love that thought process around, even though you did live in the city, you still had an influence from a rural aspect or with regards to farming, right? Which, you know, something I kind of believe
Yeah.
in is, yeah, like I think it's a great combo, right? I spent a bit of time living in Samoa growing up, which is a third world country, right? So then you come to Australia and you just, I guess, see things through different eyes. So I love what you're saying there. You had
Yeah.
that combo, right? It was
Yeah, you do see things through different eyes, because you know what people around you in the country think and what people around you in the city think, and they've got further and further apart, frankly.
right. Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
the what do you mean by I got further apart? Like the
Well, I think, you know, when I was younger, that most people in the city had some sort of rural connection. So they had, you know, they had an uncle, or they came, or their parents came from a farm, or because there's been this sort of great rural urban migration, most people would have had a lot of connection with farming in some way. They had an uncle or a friend of the families, or someone whose farm they go and visit, and, you know, maybe stay there for a few weeks, or
Yeah.
go there for holidays or whatever. And so there was a lot more connection between farming and the city then than there is now. So I think now we just have a real misunderstanding in the city about what, you know, what rural life's all about, basically.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And
No.
maybe a bit vice versa as well.
So I missed that part. Sorry.
Maybe a bit vice versa as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good point, actually. So you had exposure to both lifestyles, I guess. And what made you, after your engineering degree, I guess, what was your first job, paying job, after you studied as an engineer?
All right. So I went to North America, and I worked for a mining company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a nickel mining company in Oregon.
Interesting.
And then my next job was in Canada, working also for a nickel processing company.
Okay. What was your role in terms of the operation?
Well, in Oregon, I was a plant engineer, so
Yep.
just looking at the plant processes and trying to see things that could be improved.
Yep.
You know, using my engineering knowledge, I guess.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and in Canada, it was more of a laboratory scenario where it was, you know, more about modelling things, actually, more about modelling plant processes and relationships and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long were you overseas before you came back to Australia?
No one's asked me about these things for years. I haven't even thought about it.
And none of these things are scripted too. I just, as you're asking questions, I'm thinking, oh, this is interesting. Let's go down this path.
Sorry, what was the last one?
Yeah. How long were you away from Australia, I guess, before you came back? So you studied engineering, got a couple of jobs overseas, and then what happened after that?
Well, I spent 3 years in North America, and then did what was then pretty much obligatory overland trip through Europe, and got as far as Iran, and then came home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right.
And after that was when I did the master's degree in sociology.
Talk to me about that. When I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, I thought it was very interesting that you could argue sort of your engineering lane, like maths and science, like you're talking type brain, was looking at that. And then you've just done a master's in sociology. Like talk to me about how that sort of journey came about and the decision to start that, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose I just decided I didn't really want to be an engineer working in a remote like location for a big mining company.
Interesting.
That I really wanted to do something with more of a human focus.
Interesting.
And maybe there's a little bit of unfinished business with humanities, you know, that I hadn't really. I really wanted to master
it. In what way? What do you mean by?
Well, I mean, you know, like I sort of said I struggle a bit with English and expression and so on, and then.
Sure.
And then, so I really wanted to get on top of that.
Interesting. Okay.
Which I think I did.
That's awesome. So you came back to Australia and then studied the Masters of Sociology?
Yeah, and I think if you think about that time, I mean, I don't. Maybe you can't think about that time because you're not old enough, but you know, it was a time of sort of where youth were very rebellious, if you like,
Wow.
and sort of wanting to chart a different path from their parents, wanting to be, there's a lot of student protests, and there was the Vietnam War, and there was a new sort of attitude to how you lived.
Interesting.
And so I suppose I was part of that, really.
Yeah.
And maybe doing the sociology was also part of that.
I love that. That's amazing to think that. I think about some of the student protests, if you like, now in modern day society. I think and sometimes the commentary around, an older generation, if you like baby boomers or the lost generation, sometimes they get a bit of a reputation for not understanding the younger generation. But then I love what you just explained. You think about when you were a youth, like you did all these things, right? And that, I mean, we could take that conversation way off track, talking about that era, because I'm very interested in it. But so I guess just again in my mind, that origin story, how did you then, I guess, what was the start of your journey in the energy industry? Because you've had about 30, 40 years experience in the industry.
After graduating I sort of have this historical pattern in my career of continuing to take new directions. Although I guess with energy, that's maybe not quite so true. But
sounds like you're a Gen Z. You're like a millennial, but just was around 40 years ago.
Yeah. If only, I wouldn't mind being 20 again. But what were we just talking about?
Oh, I asked about how did you start? How did the journey start? Energy career.
Yeah. So then I went into transport after graduating, because I was looking for a job that got me into public sector planning sort of role, and so in a way I started off more of the sociology end of what I did, and as I worked in transport for a few years, I tended to migrate back to my engineering a bit, in that I used a lot of the skills that I developed in engineering. Yeah, the quantitative skills and stuff like that. Yeah, so I worked for the Commonwealth Bureau of Roads, and then for Australian Railway Research and Development Organisation. And then after that was when I got into energy.
Interesting. I'm just pulling up your LinkedIn profile here as well, so I can see that. Okay.
So go back that far.
Oh yeah. No. I did a bit of research before I saw the companies that were on there, so I've got a bit of an idea. So there was, I mean, I think you and I spoke about this briefly, but you did mention something about the Snowy Mountains. I think there's a hydropower station there at the moment, and now there's like a big expansion, obviously. But I think you were saying, this is a conversation that we had a while back, that you had some involvement in spearheading, if you like, or campaigning to have that power station there. So do you want to maybe talk about that journey, on how it started, how it came together, and how it sort of was executed?
Yeah, we've got to jump quite a few years for that one.
Oh,
that's fine. So in was it about 2006? I got an invitation from the federal government, actually, like an invitation from the Prime Minister, which I guess you'd get not to refuse, to join an expert panel. So basically, one of these reports that goes to government on changes that need to be made in the national market, because the electricity market had been introduced in 1992, and it was it was like 14 years later, and they really wanted to have another look at how things were going and what changes were now needed. And so me and 3 others were invited to join an expert group to provide a report to government on that.
Yep.
And one of the changes that basically I was instrumental in bringing in was that Snowy Hydro. It's a bit technical, this, but
Sure. Yeah.
Snowy Hydro had its own region. So in the national electricity market, there's a Victorian region, there's a South Australian region, there's a New South Wales region and a Queensland region. So there's also a Snowy region, which basically sort of held Snowy into its own. These regions are where prices are set. It's where the wholesale prices are set.
Wow.
So this all gets a bit technical, but what I proposed was that region be removed as a region, and that Snowy just be part of the New South Wales and the Victorian region, because it joins both. And what this did was make Snowy a lot less constrained in the way it operated, because operating within a region, it couldn't really contract with parties in New South Wales or Victoria, because it was bound by, it only received the price in its own region.
Yep.
So it was just it sort of really constrained their operation as a business.
Yeah.
And was really not good for the country, because it meant that this huge asset that owned by the people essentially was being limited in how it could behave commercially.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's a bit technical.
Yeah. That's all good. No,
so
that's fine. Yeah.
One of the other things that came out of that, which was, I think, as important, was introducing, converting the gas market into a proper market, bringing it under the umbrella of the national electricity market, having a gas market in the same organisation. So I think that that had a lot of impact as well.
Interesting. What was it before that? What were they, two separate entities?
Gas was the gas market. There was a gas market, but it was largely just run by the industry.
Okay.
And so that really meant that the industry had all their vested interests, and so they were only really interested in doing things in the market that helped them,
benefited them, basically. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Could you say it was unregulated?
Commercial way. Sorry.
Could you say it was unregulated? Which is maybe partly why. Gotcha. Which is why the government brought it in under their wing. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's all sort of fairly technical and remote from, everyday understanding, but pretty important stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, that's why I ask these questions, is because, I mean, part of the reason why you and I met was I had a bit of an interest in it, your actual, your values of your business, but also how your business works. And for me, like some of the things we were talking about, and I was just thinking about it myself, I honestly do not have any awareness of how any of the energy market comes together, or, how I pay for my electricity, right? And quite frankly, for me, I could be just speaking about one person. I don't really care. It's more about, being a typical like Gen Y and a millennial, I just want to know that my electricity turns on, and at a fairly, reasonable price, right? And so anyway, that's the reason I asked, is because I think you can educate people and bring more awareness, not only to the process, but make it a bit more, I guess you could say, explain it in a way that people maybe would understand if they were looking for those options. So, I guess, yeah, so you can go anyway, what I'm trying to say is you can go as technical as you want. But
but maybe to bring it back to something a bit more tangible for people, sort of in terms of what you said.
Yep.
So there's a wholesale market.
Yep.
Which is where electricity gets dispatched.
Yep.
And also contracted. So there's a price that's set. Actually, every 5 minutes there's a price set in the spot market in each of the regions. So in New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, etc. So that's then around that spot market is a contract market. but that's all called the wholesale market. And then there's network businesses which carry the electricity around, and then there's suppliers who deliver it to customers, who don't actually deliver it to customers, who sell it to customers. So there's really those three parts of the industry, wholesale market, network businesses, and end providers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That I've got so many questions. I didn't want to interrupt your flow though, because that made a lot of sense. So the thing that jumped out to me though, so the third party in that example that you used, which is the energy provider, I think is what you said, they don't necessarily bid for the price, or they don't deliver it. They're just the business face that people are familiar with, right?
Yeah, their role is just financial, basically.
Interesting.
They don't have anything to do with electrons.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I think that's fascinating. And so you've got 40 years experience in the industry. What drives so the third example that you use are the energy providers. What is the value they bring? Like, what drives their product for consumers, I guess?
Well, they do. I mean, at one level, they do billing. So they deal with all the. They take the money from you, and they pay other people in the wholesale market for the energy that you've used.
Yep.
The second big thing they do is they manage risk. So because the wholesale market is setting price every 5 minutes, it's very volatile place.
Wow.
So they manage the risk of that and deliver mostly just a fixed price to you. So you pay, I don't know, $1 a day and 20 cents a kilowatt hour for your electricity. And they have to manage to deliver that to you at that price by putting contracts in place and so on. There's really those two things they do.
Yeah, gotcha. That's so interesting. So I think you said it's the spot price that changes every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
What is the driver behind that? Like, yeah, that just blows my mind. Like, what is the driver behind that changing every 5 minutes?
Well, it's really because electricity is a really weird thing in that it has to be. There's no storage, essentially. Once electricity is generated, it has to go somewhere.
Right.
So you really have to match supply and demand almost exactly. Down to the second.
Instantaneously, basically.
Yeah, down to the second.
Wow.
Because if you don't, then the system can become unstable.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's why the price varies on a 5 minute basis, because it's saying, well, we need more energy than we need more electricity than we thought.
Yep.
5 minutes ago.
Yep.
In the next 5 minutes, who can provide that? And if the person that's providing that,
yep.
If there's only one of them, then they're going to bid the price up.
Wow. Gotcha. Talk to me about the energy suppliers. So you were saying that, from what I understood, there's different regions, but are there? How does it sort of work? I guess either per region or from the source to the 5 minute change in the spot price. Well, what's the process there? Like, is there one main government entity and they distribute that to different companies? Or talk to me about that sort of process. How does it get from generating electricity to the 5 minute spot price change?
Oh, okay. So that's where the AEMO, which is the Australian Energy Market Operator, that operate both the gas and electricity market, they run the spot market.
Got
So
you.
they accept offers from generators, and then they decide who will be given instructions to dispatch. So they give instructions to, these generators, you're on.
Yep.
You're on, and this is where we want you to be.
Interesting.
Because, but in order to get dispatched, they're dependent on the bids that they make.
Yes. Yep.
So, or the offers they make, I guess, rather than bids. So they make offers, and then if they're accepted by EMO, then they get dispatched.
Got you.
And that's getting changed, potentially every 5 minutes. Although, of course, it may not be much change from 1 5 minutes to the next, of course.
Yeah, got you. Yeah. What's the there's again so many questions, and I want to go in so many directions. So we spoke about the energy. I just remember the 3 categories. So you might be able to remind me what they were. But I think the third one was the energy supplier, and then the second one was the distributor. Sorry, I think you said, and then the first one was the generator, if you like. So the network, the distributor, I guess. What's their, so obviously they're distributing the power, so to speak. Are they, so that it sounds like they're mainly dictated by the 5 minute spot price change, and they're just dictated to based off, okay, deliver the energy here.
Well, they have if you imagine this is like a network with like a water supply or something like that, with a whole lot of taps off.
Yep.
Then they're just the pipes.
Yep.
So when the taps get turned on, the water flows down the pipes. They don't have much to do with the water.
Yep. Yep.
They just run the pipes, and they need to make sure that there's enough pipes to get the water to where it's got to go, or to get the electricity to where it's got to go. So they manage the wires and the transformers and the switching stations and so on to get the electricity to where it has to go.
Yep. And their biggest risk is probably maintenance, I guess, and the reliability of their infrastructure.
Well, yes, they have a reliability risk. Yeah. But their main job is to keep their network able to deliver the power that is demanded, I guess. Yep.
Gotcha. So fascinating. So many more questions, but I guess to summarize, to bring it back into the Energy Umpire vision, if you like. In a nutshell, the company provides a service where you are able to provide consumers or customers with a better packaged option on a month-to-month basis. So given, sort of the technical journey that we've just been on, are you able to speak a little bit into maybe just start with the product first, and then I want to hear a little bit about the origin story on like how you decided, okay, this is something that I'm going to pursue.
Yeah, well, do you mind if I do it the other way around?
Yeah, I as I was saying it, I realized that's a bit back to front. Yeah, good question.
So, yeah, having been around and involved in the design of the wholesale market and in the breakup of the SEC and involved in the development of the national market, I guess I had quite a bit of history as to how things evolved and why they evolved. And I think that the one thing that was the national market, I think in general, has held up really well to, for events that have happened since. There's a few new things happening now with renewables that mean there's some tweaking needed, but I don't think wholesale change is needed in the wholesale market. It's stood up pretty well. But I think there's a couple of areas that haven't stood up as well. And I think the retail market, or the provider market, the end part of the market.
The category number 3 you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, the category number 3,
yep.
The energy, the person you deal with, the AGL, the Origin, the Energy Australia, that you get your electricity, you buy your electricity from, that part of the market hasn't worked well.
Interesting.
And the reason for that was I think we sort of believed that competition would solve all problems, and that because there was competing, because there was high level of competition in the end market, that would drive margins down. And basically it hasn't. It hasn't driven markets down. It hasn't driven prices down because they found that people were not really, they're a bit passive, and it was all too hard, and they didn't really understand it. And so, sure, some people were on the ball and were able to work out the best price and did it regularly, but most people just, got on with their life doing other things and weren't that interested. And
Yep.
The result of that was that we had sort of a really exploitative environment set up, where basically the longer you were with a provider, the more they ripped you off.
Wow.
We also because there's such high levels of switching, like around 20% of customers switch every year.
Wow.
So, if you say there's 8 million customers in the national market, then that means 1.6 million of them are switching providers every year.
Yep.
So, in order for the big boys to get customers, they had to have some mechanism to get them, because and so these comparison services have grown up, which are basically parasitic, because they're effectively acting for the provider, not for the customer.
Yes.
They're just comparing their mates or the people they have arrangements with, and they switch you. They don't really care whether you get a good deal or a bad deal, because they get paid when you switch.
Gotcha. They get the kickback from the provider.
I'm not saying they always give you a bad deal, but
yeah,
they don't care.
I gotcha. Yeah. There's no real incentive or how would a consumer know what the cheaper option is? Like you said, generally speaking, it's a bit of a unknown thing that people don't really, they just trust the company, as I guess you could say. It's a bit of a lower priority. So I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So the companies like iSelect make it cheaper. Finder, CanStar.
Yep.
They're just basically spruikers for the providers, and they get paid when you switch through them, or real estate agents, or all the moving companies.
Yeah.
It's basically all a scam.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not to put too fine a point on it.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's been lost, that's maybe even more important for the industry. I mean, that part's really important for consumers, but what's also been lost is that there's no one with an incentive to change the way customers behave. So there's no one with an incentive to deal with the longer term problems that the industry has, like the management of solar panels, the management of batteries in homes, the management of electric vehicles, and so on, because the end provider just has a transactional relationship with customers. They don't have any ownership of them, because they have to be able to switch to someone else, so that they're not interested in investing in customers, if you like.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So for those two reasons, it sounds more complicated than it really is. So firstly, customers are getting ripped off. Secondly, there's the reforms that are needed in the way tariffs are designed aren't getting done because of the way the industry is structured. For those two reasons, I think that part of the reform package in the early 90s has failed in that area. So that's really why I set up Energy Umpire.
Yep.
Because we wanted to simplify the process where a customer could get the cheapest price. We're still trying to figure out how to participate in the reform part of it, but how they can get this cheapest price in a simple way.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yep. No, thanks for explaining that. Again, it blows my mind. It's fascinating. So many questions. So the service that Energy Umpire provides is a month-to-month subscription, and the company reviews all the providers basically, and then suggests to the person who's subscribed, if you like, to switch based off a cheaper rate for them. Is that in a nutshell the explanation of the service?
yeah, that's in a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, we have two levels of service. We have a service where we set up your account at the start and then send you regular updates on who the cheapest provider is.
Yep.
And then the second level of service where we analyze every bill for you and and essentially do more of the work for you, if you like.
Gotcha.
By analyzing every bill and giving you a savings report. And so then, yes, I'll switch to this other provider. I'm going to save $100 because you may not be interested in switching if you're only saving, $20.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm.
Yep. Interesting. No, I gotcha. So,
And we also automate all that so that we provide the customer with an email that they use to get their bills, and so then we get the bill at the same time as the customer gets the bill.
Real time. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I gotcha. Now there's so much more I want to talk about, but yeah, I think we'll leave it for another episode. Thanks so much for joining me, mate, and obviously just sharing a little bit of your own personal origin story on how you got involved in the industry, and then also your vast experience in setting up obviously your own business and then the values of your business and what you're trying to drive there. So I really appreciate your time, mate, and look forward to catching up on another session where we can go deeper in some of those technical matters that you're talking about.
Great. All right. No, I enjoyed it too, Melky. So yeah, you probed a few areas I'd forgotten all about, just about.
And I was a bit sneaky too. I didn't put them on this is usually how it works, is I just think of stuff as we're going, and I didn't put it on the sheet. So might have caught you off guard there, but thank you, mate. All the best, and we'll chat to you again soon.
Okay.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Melky.
See
Bye.
you.